NRL news, they've pretty much mirror imaged the AFL's decision to bring in an extra
mirror
player.
image is probably not a fair assessment, but it ballpark of a similar idea.
Yeah. So 2 weeks ago, the night before the AFL kicked off, they decided to have a 23rd man come in, a substitute for any injuries. And the NRL has announced an 18th man will come in for head injuries only. Can you run us through the particulars of this rule, Sean? Because it seems pretty ridiculous to me.
Yeah, kind of silly. So, of course, last round, there's about, in total, there was, I think, 13 injuries and 7 concussions. So over 20-odd injuries, which is going to force the league to make 20 different changes this week to teams. So they've come out and then made this rule. So from round 5, because the coming round's round 4, so not for this round, but from the following round, they can have an 18th man subbed in, but he's only allowed to be subbed in if your team fails 3 HIAs. So that's head
3
injury assessment.
It's injury assessment. So essentially for concussions.
Concussion test.
Yeah, it's a concussion test. They can only be replaced, well, the sub needs to be an emerging player. So I don't know what that definition actually means at this point. Are they then going to throw a bunch of 18-year-olds out there as emerging stars? Or are they going to...
an emerging 31-year-old?
Exactly.
I'll go run the water out for the boys.
Just pick someone out.
Just
pick someone out of the crowd.
No 3 KOs. two and I'm done.
So the other part of this emerging player needs to be rotated weekly, so it can't be the same guy week to week. So I don't know where they're getting all these guys and how they're fitting them under... well, maybe that's why they're emerging players, because they don't technically count against the salary cap. I don't know, but it just seems odd.
Yeah.
And the 3 failed head assessments. 3, if you've got 3 guys with concussions, so rare.
Well, and what's the message that they're sending out? It is rare. It did happen this week.
So it happened this week in the Sharks game. So they lost their entire bench and had 3 guys fail HIAs.
But even then, in that Raiders game, it was 2
head assessments and 1 ankle as a comparison. So the last time...
So even in that Raiders game, the man wouldn't have come on.
So the last time that 3 HIAs happened before last weekend was in 2016 when it happened to the Knights. And they lost Mullins... I can't remember who the other 2 were at the time.
It was 5 years ago.
But it was 5 years ago.
No one remembers.
So
those 3 blokes don't remember.
Yeah, so it's probably going to be... It'll be another 5 years before this rule actually gets used again. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So I think what's really interesting, we talked last week about that sweet spot between the league playing for pace, because we're talking about Red Dogs, playing for pace, and then player safety. This rule, to me, very much leads towards they prefer the pace and the fatigue versus player safety.
Well, what's the message that they're sending? We're happy for 3 guys to get knocked out in a game. That's fine before we'll step in and intervene. Like they had the ability here to. I don't mind the rule, but it should just be 1 guy gets concussed. You can change it, and it's only for concussion.
Yeah, or they do it the way the AFL done is it's if you're going to pick 3 guys, like I can understand, they want the fatigue in the game, so that's the balancing act they're trying to play. So if you lose 1 guy, you still got 3 on the bench. That's probably fair. Yep. You lose 2, okay, half your bench is gone. Probably make do with that, but you lose 3 guys, and you're like, well, you're decimated. That's almost all your forwards, and you got like a utility guy left,
and it changes the outcome of the game, as we saw in two occasions on the weekend.
Yeah, so that's what they're trying to avoid. Is like, we don't want to avoid that. 1 guy on the bench or no guys on the bench, and there's team playing full 80 minutes. But having said that, this rule really doesn't address that point. Like, you got a guy, you got 3 broken legs there, and they're like, well. Too bad. No sub for you. You to play
3 ACLs.
Yeah, exactly. So it seems stupid. I would have thought if you had 3 guys like that with significant injuries being ruled out from the game, can't play, then make the change. Because, sorry to interrupt.
No, you're going. Keep going. You're
fine. You use the Raiders as an example. They lost 3 guys and had Sterling on the bench, a hooker essentially, as their only replacement. But then a guy like Curtis Scott, who played with broken ribs, so he's going to miss a couple of weeks, then has to play the full game because they can't save him off. And they scored 2 tries down his side because he couldn't tackle anyone.
Yeah.
But, the league's not kind of aware, like that's a fracture or a broken rib. He takes a knock the wrong way and that rib goes through a lung or something more vital, and then the league's in a lot more trouble than it is now. That's kind of bloke you want to pull and say, sit on the bench, like absolute last resort, play him instead of forcing him to play another 60-odd minutes with a broken rib. So that's the kind of guy you'd sub out and put someone in for. So
Mine was more a question: is it so 3 blokes have to be ruled out with concussion, or you're 3 blokes getting an HIA? Because
It's
if they
three
fail it, they've
failed
got
HIAs.
so it's
so they-
failed HIA. It's not even if
It's 3
Yeah, right.
failed. So the doctor's got to go 3 blokes so concussed they can't take the field again.
And let's use the Raiders example again. You know, they had 2 fail, and then Tarpany did his ankle. So if I'm Ricky Stewart, I might be like, Tarpany, you're going to have a head assessment and just say you failed it. Just so he can get an extra play. Because he's absolutely going to want another
exactly
player there.
right.
Yeah.
He's just like, he's gone off when he's fallen over through his ankle. He's had a head knock, and sorry, he's had,
That's why he's fallen over. He's actually dizzy.
Exactly. He's failed it, so I can get that extra sub because they needed it. Like,
It's the same conversation we were having 2
With
weeks
the
ago.
AFL, exactly right.
How the first thing you think is how can coaches weasel their way around it to make an advantage. Monks, have you got an emerging player definition there?
So there's no definition just yet. They're finalising that definition, consulting with clubs and coaches. But it looks like it's going to be someone from a lower grade. And it's, like we mentioned, it's going to be rotating so they're not missing time in the lower grade.
Right.
To work.
So it's got to be a different
grade.
grade.
Right, you're not
every
picking
week.
your best player.
Yeah.
From this point. Okay.
And then that kind of negates the ability for the coaches to strategically pick someone
Yeah.
as an 18th man.
I quite like that idea, actually rotating, but do it for the bench spot, not for this. Imagine it seems so reactionary. Like, we had a team with 3.
doesn't
Like,
it?
if this ever happens again, we'll be sweet to cover it.
Yeah.
But it's such a like you're right. It doesn't
These
send a good
things super
message.
rare. Yeah.
It doesn't actually fit the mold to really help a team at all. It's
and
just
it doesn't, address that player safety to a regard.
Not remotely.
either.
I don't think it does
You're forcing,
remotely.
if like we say, it's broken legs and you've got no one on the bench, you're forcing guys to play 80 minutes with no substitution. So it doesn't address their, their safety. And it's like, hey, now I'm fatiguing myself to the point where I'm putting more stress on my body where I'm more likely to then do more injuries.
Soft tissue injuries as well. When you fatigue more, you're more likely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a strange one, and I think you got the exact right word there. Reactionary. We've had our hand forced. We need to show like we're doing something. We care, but I don't know. I think they've sort of dropped the ball on this. Who knows? In the next few weeks, maybe they do. Chop and change it a little bit, but. That's the breaking news in the NRL, really, the big story.
It seems very Volandis-esque. Like it's, there's this and we'll put it in. And, in 5 weeks, if they need to change it, it seems like he just will. He's very
he's proactive.
cavalier in that way, I guess, that if he wants something changed, we're doing it.
all the rule
We're doing this
changes over
bubble,
the
we're
last
going to
few
do it.
years.
So I don't know if he would have been, running the show. I doubt he's, a medical professional. The man knows racehorses. But it's just such a snap decision. And then, not to AFL this up, but did they want something similar but make it different so it's their rule? They didn't want to do the concussion stuff.
Was their hand forced at all? Like in that regard, like AFL's done it, and then everyone's gone, "Hey, you need to do something like the AFL," and they're trying to compete.
And there's the permanent code wars. There's a permanent code
Exactly.
wars. It is very similar across both. I think what it comes down to is looking after the bloke with the ball or without the ball and his head and his brain for the 40 years after he finishes playing footy. It's regardless what colour the footy is or what sport it is.
Exactly. Instead of being a meat market,
You need to have, you need to have that
grinder.
as your central thing. Don't worry about the optics or the rule changes. Just worry about the guys that are actually going out there.
And for me, the optics are poor. Three HIAs. Like
I feel like I've got a concussion listening to those rules. Like,
I thought I was just listening to me.
Speaking of rules, what's the rules on returning back from concussions?
I don't think they've got a 12-day rule like the AFL does, because I know Chris, who was one of the Raiders
He's
guys,
playing this weekend.
got a concussion.
Ryan James is playing
this week. So I think that's just they got
up to the doctor.
And they got to pass, whatever test they've got leading into it. But you look at the Roosters team where they've got 3 guys. 2 of them probably getting close to being forced into retirement due to concussions.
Cordner and Jake Friend.
The other one just blew his ACL out, so he's probably not getting any more concussions this year. but still had a
that's it.
number of head knocks. So you worry about them long term.
We'll keep an eye on that and see whether they do implement it as it's written in round 5. Yeah.
So just to keep following on from this story a little bit, with all the rule changes and that move to more fatigue and pace, there's kind of a bit of chat is the speed of the game getting to the point where it's then too tough? I think especially if you lose your bench, it's definitely get too tough. You saw on the weekend, multitude of players, throwing up on the field because they've just been run ragged and because they just the speed of the game plus the fact that when you lose your bench or you lose key players off your bench, that it kind of defeats the purpose. Well, it defeats not the purpose. There's no recovery essentially.
Yeah.
And then they're completely different body types. The AFL.
You've been talking about it, the big meathead is sort of a bit like a dinosaur. It's going away. You need to be an all-round athlete.
Can you imagine someone like Juno Paulo playing 80 minutes?
Yeah.
It's like, no, he's a 40-minute guy, or maybe you get 50 out of him on a good day, but you're going to force him to play 80 and you're just like...
No, he can't do it.
I guess the question is it leading to more injuries? The lack of substitutions, the lack of recovery time, is that doing damage?
Yeah. I did see something that statistically in the last 4 years they're about on track for injuries.
Yep.
But I don't think that took into consideration the amount of, say, concussions. So the concussions, because as they're diagnosed, they're being a lot more careful with it. That number, of course, is a lot higher than it had been in the past.
Okay, yeah.
But significant injuries like Kiri's ACL is on track, on par from what
They're
it
not
had
having
been.
any more serious.
Yeah. It's all. Yeah. It's in the ballpark. It's not significantly more. Like it's not.
Right.
It's not double what it was or anything like that.
And it is early season. So you talk about fatigue. They aren't ready. It is 3 games. It takes.
Wait until you come around to Origin and then see what happens.
Yeah, the bodies are hardened. You've been running into blokes. You are built into it. But
it'll go one of two ways. It'll be wear and tear, or it'll be they'll have got conditioning on their bodies.
Exactly. This is why I turn injuries off when I play Madden or any sport. Like I just hate it when you see, the best player's out, so now the team's gonna be shit. I hate them so much. But unfortunately, you can't do that in life, and it's part of sport.
Maybe one day. Maybe one day.
God will turn off injuries.
Well, maybe when we're half bionic. And